in psychological transformation. When you stop becoming the person the world expects you to be. And Carl Jung believed that this moment can feel strangely unsettling. You may become quieter, more selective, less interested in approval. Certain relationships may suddenly feel different. Old ambitions may lose their attraction. And the version of yourself you once fought so hard to protect may begin to feel like a costume you have finally outgrown. Most people interpret this as confusion. Jung would have looked deeper, because sometimes what feels like losing yourself is actually the beginning of discovering yourself. And hidden inside the ancient language of alchemy is a symbol for this transformation, Rubedo. The final stage, the reddening, a symbol of psychological completion, integration, and the union of opposites. Jung was fascinated by alchemy because he saw its strange images as more than descriptions of chemicals being transformed. He saw them as mirrors of the human psyche. The old alchemists spoke about transforming base material into something precious. Jung recognized a similar process inside the human being. A person enters life divided. Part of you wants freedom. Another part wants security. One part wants to be loved. Another fears being vulnerable. One part wants success. Another is terrified of being exposed as inadequate. And beneath the personality you show the world, there are often qualities you have pushed away because they did not fit the identity you are trying to maintain. Jung called this hidden territory the asterisk shadow. And here is where the journey becomes uncomfortable, because your shadow does not disappear simply because you refuse to look at it. It waits. It influences your choices from behind the curtain. It can appear as jealousy, overreaction, people-pleasing, arrogance, fear, resentment. Even your strongest judgments about other people can sometimes reveal something you have not yet understood about yourself. Think about the last person who irritated you far more than they logically should have. Why did they bother you so much? Maybe they were arrogant. Maybe they were selfish. Or maybe, just maybe, they were expressing something you had forbidden yourself to express. Confidence, freedom, ambition, the ability to say no. This is one of the uncomfortable discoveries. of Jungian psychology. Sometimes what you reject in another person is connected to something unresolved within yourself. And once you recognize that, your relationship with the world begins to change. You stop asking only what is wrong with them. You start asking, what is this reaction revealing about me? That question can change everything, because now the outer world becomes a mirror. A difficult relationship becomes information. A repeated conflict becomes a pattern. A powerful emotional reaction becomes a message. And instead of immediately escaping discomfort, you become curious about it. This is where individuation begins. For Jung, individuation was not about becoming more special. It was about becoming more fully yourself. Not the personalities, not the personality you created to survive, not the identity your parents imagined, not the version your friends expect, not the person social media tells you to become, but becoming yourself requires something most people desperately avoid. The meeting the parts of yourself you do not want to see. Imagine spending years building a beautiful house. You decorate the rooms everyone can see. You polish the entrance. You make the living room impressive. But there is one locked basement. You never go downstairs. You tell yourself it doesn't matter. Until one night, you hear something moving beneath the floor. You can ignore it. You can turn up the music. You can invite people over. You can pretend nothing is there. But eventually, you realize the only way to become peaceful is to open the door. That basement is the psychological shadow. And the strange thing is, when you finally enter it, you often discover something unexpected. Not a monster, a wounded part of yourself, a forgotten desire, a buried fear, a quality you were taught was unacceptable, a, a, a younger version of you still waiting to be understood. This is why genuine transformation can feel painful before it feels liberating. You are not simply adding something new to your personality. You are confronting everything you had to become in order to be accepted. And perhaps you are beginning to notice this in your own life. Maybe you no longer enjoy pretending. Small talk feel exhausting. Certain conversations feel empty. You don't want to impress people as much as you used to. You are becoming uncomfortable with relationships where you have to perform a version of yourself. And strangely, you may even feel guilty about it. You may think, why am I changing? Why don't these things make me happy anymore? Why do I suddenly need more solitude? But Jungian psychology offers another possibility. Perhaps your psyche is asking you to move inward, because there comes a point when external validation cannot answer an internal question. You can collect achievements, you can gain followers, you can earn money, you can receive praise, you can become admired, and still quietly wonder, but who am I when nobody is watching? That question is dangerous, because once you seriously ask it, many borrowed identities begin to collapse. And this is where one of the first signs of Rubedo may appear. You stop needing to prove yourself, not because you suddenly believe you are better than everyone, but because you realize that constantly proving your worth is exhausting. You, you don't need to win every argument. You don't need everyone to understand your decisions. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You begin discovering a quieter form of confidence. The confidence of someone who knows that being misunderstood does not automatically mean being wrong. And something even deeper happens. You begin separating your asterisk from your entire identity. You can notice yourself feeling insecure without saying, I am an insecure person. You can feel anger without becoming anger. You can experience fear without allowing fear to make the decision. You become the observer of your inner world, and that small distance creates freedom. Because before consciousness, every emotion can feel like a command. After consciousness, an emotion becomes information. Fear says, don't go. You can listen, but you don't have to obey. Anger says, attack. You can listen, but you don't have to obey. Insecurity says, prove yourself. You can listen, but you don't have to obey. This is the beginning of psychological sovereignty. But Jung's deeper insight was that integration does not mean destroying the shadow. It means understanding it. Because the energy trapped inside rejected parts of yourself can eventually become usable. The anger you once feared may contain boundaries. The ambition you once judged may contain purpose. The sensitivity you tried to hide may contain perception. The solitude you once hated may become the place where your clearest thoughts emerge. Nothing is wasted when it becomes conscious. And this is where the symbolism of Rubedo becomes especially powerful. The final stage is not about becoming pure by removing everything imperfect. It is about bringing divided parts together, the light and the darkness, the strength and the vulnerability, the ambition and the peace. The person you show the world and the person you have been hiding from yourself. But there is a problem. When you begin integrating these parts, your old life may no longer fit. And this is the point where many people become frightened, because the transformation has not yet produced a new identity. The old identity is disappearing. The new one has not fully arrived. You are standing between two versions of yourself, and that space can feel like emptiness. But what if it isn't emptiness? What if it is the psychological equivalent of a chrysalis? What if the discomfort you are experiencing is not evidence that you are falling apart, but evidence that the old structure can no longer contain who you are becoming? Because the next sign of Rubedo is even more unsettling. You begin to realize that some of the things you once chased were never truly yours. And once you discover, asterisk, why that happens, you may never look at your own life the same way again. The most unsettling part of psychological transformation is not discovering that you have changed. See, it is discovering, asterisk, why you had to change. For years, you may have believed your goals were simply those, your goals. The career, the money, the relationship, the recognition, the image of success. But Jungian psychology asks some more uncomfortable question. At the Eurasian, asterisk, did you choose these things consciously? Or did you build your life around becoming acceptable to other people? Asterisk. This is where the idea of the asterisk persona becomes important. Jung used the persona to describe the social face we present to the world. It is not necessarily fake. You need a persona to function in society. You behave differently with your boss than with your closest friend. You may speak differently at work than you do when you're completely alone. The problem begins when the mask becomes more important than the person wearing it. When you spend so many years performing a role that you forget there is a human being underneath it, the successful one, the strong one, the nice one, the responsible one, the, the person who never needs help, the person who always knows what to do. And eventually, something inside you whispers, I don't want to perform anymore. That whisper can change your entire life. Suddenly, achievements that once gave you excitement feel strangely empty. You receive the compliment you used to crave, and it doesn't satisfy you. You reach a goal you spent years pursuing, and instead of celebration, you feel a strange silence. This can be terrifying because you were taught that achieving the goal would finally make you feel complete. But Jung's perspective points toward a deeper problem. The ego can achieve almost everything and still remain hungry if the life being built does not belong to the deeper self. This is why some people become successful and still feel lost. They climb the mountain only to discover they were standing on the wrong mountain. And perhaps you have experienced a smaller version of this. You finally get what you wanted. Then, almost immediately, your mind creates another target, another number, another achievement, another person to impress, another level to reach. The finish line keeps moving. Why? Because the real hunger was never the achievement, it was recognition. You wanted proof that you mattered. But no amount of external proof can permanently settle an internal question. That is why individuation requires you to separate your authentic desires from the desires you inherited. And this process can create a strange loneliness because when you stop living according to expectations, you may temporarily lose the approval that came with obedience. People may not understand your decisions. Some may call you selfish. Some may say, you've changed. Some may prefer the old version of you. And this is where many people retreat. They return to the persona because the persona is rewarded. But psychological growth often begins precisely where the reward disappears. You start choosing what is meaningful instead of what is impressive. You begin saying no without writing a 10-minute explanation. You stop laughing at things you don't find funny just to fit in. You stop pretending to be interested. You stop maintaining relationships solely because of history. And suddenly, your life becomes quieter. But underneath that quietness, something powerful is happening. Your energy is returning. The energy you once spent managing everyone's perception of you can now be used to actually live. And this brings us back to the shadow, because when you stop performing, the hidden parts of yourself become easier to see. Maybe you discover how badly you want to create something. Maybe you realize you've been angry for years. Maybe you recognize that your constant helpfulness was partly a fear of rejection. Maybe you discover that your independence was actually an inability to trust anyone. These realizations are not always pleasant, but they are valuable, because you cannot transform what you refuse to recognize. Imagine driving a car while refusing to look at the dashboard. The warning lights are inconvenient, so you cover them. The engine makes strange noises, so you turn up the music. For a while, everything seems fine, until the car stops. The psyche can work the same way: anxiety, resentment, compulsion, repeated relationship patterns, emotional overreactions. These can become psychological warning lights, not proof that you are defective, signals that something inside requires attention. And this is one of the most important shifts in Jungian thinking. Symptoms can become messages. Instead of asking only, how do I get rid of this feeling? You begin asking, Astros, what is this feeling trying to tell me? That question creates curiosity instead of war. And curiosity allows consciousness to enter places. Fear, once controlled, consider anger. You might think anger is the problem, but sometimes anger is protecting a boundary you have ignored. Consider jealousy. You might feel ashamed of it, but jealousy can reveal a desire you have been too afraid to admit. Consider envy. It can expose something you secretly want. Consider loneliness. It can reveal that you have been surrounding yourself with people while remaining emotionally disconnected. The emotion is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is the messenger. And when you listen carefully, the message can become surprisingly precise. This is why shadow integration is not about becoming morally perfect. It is about becoming honest. You can admit, I want recognition. I am afraid of failure. I am jealous. I need affection. I am angry. I don't know what I'm doing. Those sentences can feel humiliating to the ego, but psychologically, they can be liberating, because once you can name something, you can relate to it. Before you name it, It controls you from the background. And there is another transformation that happens here. You become less reactive. Someone criticizes you. The old you immediately responds. The new you pauses. Someone ignores you. The old you sends another message. The new you notices the urge and asks why. Uh, uh, Someone challenges your identity. The old you becomes defensive. The new you becomes curious. That pause may only last 2 seconds, but those 2 seconds can separate unconscious behavior from conscious choice. And gradually, you begin experiencing something Jung considered essential to psychological development. Asterisk, greater inner freedom. Not freedom from emotions, freedom from being completely controlled by them. You still become angry. You still become afraid. You still experience insecurity. You still have bad days. The difference is that these experiences no longer define your entire identity. You can hold contradictory truths. You can be confident and uncertain, strong and vulnerable, ambitious and peaceful, independent and deeply connected. This is what psychological integration begins to look like. You stop forcing yourself into simple categories. You no longer need to be the strong one every day. You can admit you need help. You can be successful without pretending you have everything figured out. You can love someone without abandoning yourself. And perhaps most importantly, you can fail without deciding that you are a failure. That is a profound change, because the ego often turns events into identities. I failed becomes I'm a failure. They rejected me becomes I'm unwanted. I made a mistake becomes I can't trust myself. But consciousness creates separation. Something happened to me. It is not the entirety of who I am. That distinction allows you to recover. And as you recover, uh, uh, your definition of success begins changing. You stop asking, how impressive is my life? And start asking, does my life feel internally true? That is a much harder question, because nobody can answer it for you.
Your parents cannot.
Your friends cannot. Your audience cannot. Your culture cannot. Only you can. And perhaps this is the point where Rubedo begins to move from an ancient symbol into something personal. You are no longer trying to eliminate your contradictions. You are learning how to hold them. You are no longer trying to become a perfect person. You are becoming a conscious one. And once that happens, something remarkable begins. You stop needing life to constantly confirm that you are on the right path. You develop an inner compass. Not certainty, not perfection, a compass. And even when the road disappears into darkness, you can still take the next step. But there is one final transformation that separates temporary self-improvement from genuine individuation. It happens when you stop asking, who am I supposed to become? And finally begin asking, asterisk, what is life asking me to become? That question changes the direction of everything. Perhaps the deepest sign of Rubedo is not that you finally understand yourself. It is that you stop obsessively searching for the perfect version of yourself. You begin living. This is where Jung's idea of individuation becomes practical. The goal was never to construct a flawless personality. It was to bring the divided parts of yourself into a more conscious relationship. Your strength and vulnerability, your ambition and peace, your light and shadow. You no longer need to destroy the parts of yourself you dislike. You learn from them. Fear can become awareness. Anger can reveal a boundary. Solitude can become clarity. Failure can become humility. And suddenly, life itself becomes part of your psychological development. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin asking, asterisk, what is this experience revealing about me? That question can transform suffering into insight. Maybe the relationship that ended taught you where you were abandoning yourself. Maybe the failure exposed an identity built entirely around achievement. Maybe loneliness forced you to discover that you had never truly learned how to be alone. Maybe rejection showed you how much of your self-worth depended on other people's approval. The experience may still hurt, but now it has meaning, and that is the difference. You are no longer simply surviving your life. You are becoming conscious through it. This is why Rubedo should not be treated as some magical finish line. There is no morning when you suddenly become permanently awakened. You will still get angry. You will still doubt yourself. You will still make mistakes. But something has changed. You recover faster. You observe yourself sooner. You return to what matters. And you stop abandoning yourself every time life becomes uncomfortable. That may be the quietest form of transformation. One day, you may realize you no longer need to prove that you have changed. You simply respond differently. You walk away differently. You walk away differently. You love differently. You choose differently. You live differently. And perhaps that is the real symbol hidden inside Rubedo, not becoming someone completely new, but finally becoming integrated enough to live as the person you were beneath all the masks. So if your life feels strange right now, if old identities are falling away, if certain people no longer fit, if silence feels more valuable, if you are confronting parts of yourself you once avoided, don't rush to call yourself lost. You may simply be between versions of yourself, and that space is uncomfortable because the old identity is disappearing before the new one becomes clear. Stay with it. Look inward. Listen carefully, because the person emerging from this process may not be louder, richer, or more admired. They may simply be asterisk more real. And perhaps that is the final sign of Rubedo. You stop trying to become whole because you finally stop running from the parts of yourself that were asking to be understood.